Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of my top 5 Dynasty Fantasy Football takeaways. This time from the NFL Championship games, AFC, NFC Championship. Now, some of you might know, I was actually at the AFC Championship in Baltimore. It was a lot of fun. So I have a little more insight into that game than I would otherwise. As for the NFC Championship, we'll talk about that as well. But overall, it was a very exciting week of playoff football. One game left, the Super Bowl. But let's jump into my first takeaway from this week. Travis Kelce, revival game. He had 11 catches for 116 yards, touchdown on 11 targets, 80% of snaps played. But it's important to note that no other receivers did very much in this game outside of Rashee Rice. And Kelce has kind of been on a cold streak lately. His first 10-catch or 100-yard performance since week 7. Now, this big game might give you one last dynasty sell window for Kelce. He's 34 years old. I don't think he's going to retire, but there's an off chance that he does with all the Taylor Swift stuff going on and all that. Right now, in January DLF ADP, he's still very high. Tight end 8, 74.5 overall. Seems way too high for me. The Chiefs literally had no other wide receivers this year other than Rice. They will bring in at least one, if not two, significant wide receivers to fix this offense. Now, you might say, they're in the Super Bowl. What do you need to fix? Just because you're winning doesn't mean you can't improve. In this game, their passing offense disappeared in the second half. The whole offense disappeared because they stopped the run. They were able to shut down Kelce and Rice. And, the offense just couldn't move other than that. They can't do anything other than go to Kelce, Rice, or run. You need at least something else, some other threat. So, yeah, Travis Kelce is a dynasty sell for me. But my other takeaway from the game I was actually at that the Ravens offense looked horrible, really bad. And I was stunned because they looked really good all year, but not in this one. Lamar Jackson, he made some mistakes. He lost that fumble in the pocket. That interception, yes, of course, the terrible performance from the referees. They should have called a penalty on that play, but the throw was a terrible throw anyway. It was into triple coverage, ill-advised. It wouldn't have been completed with or without a penalty. So, fumble, interception. He did have 8 for 54 rushing. He was fine, but just wasn't enough. And then, oddly, they went away from the run. Justice Hill and Gus Edwards totaled just 6 carries. Edwards had 3 carries for 20 yards. He was doing well, but they just totally went away from him. Zay Flowers was their only wide receiver, but he cost them the game with that goal line fumble. They were so great this year. Again, similar to the Chiefs, they were great, but obviously the offense was missing pieces. They need a running back they can trust. Losing J.K. Dobbins hurt them. If they had J.K. Dobbins, maybe they would have won this game. If Mark Andrews were fully healthy, which he wasn't in this game, maybe they would have won. But even with Andrews healthy, Bateman, OBJ, Aguilar, they all sucked in this game. They did nothing at all, especially Bateman. So they need a wide receiver, too, they can trust. And I do have a little bit of a concern with Zay Flowers that his production was kind of based on there's literally no one else there. And if they bring in a wide receiver, too, who's not Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers' production might go down. So there's something to keep in mind for next year. And the other thing, whatever running back they bring in, I'm really going to like, because this is a really good rushing offense. And I think they just didn't want to trust Edwards or Hill in such a big spot. But if they have a running back they can trust, look out. Now, let's move on to the next game. The Lions. David Montgomery outperformed Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, let's take a look. Montgomery had 15 carries for 93 yards and a touchdown and 2 catches for 20 yards, played 43% of the snaps. Gibbs, 12 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown, 3 catches for 11 yards, lost a fumble, 54% of snaps. Now, it's important to note what I'm saying here and what I'm not saying. What I'm saying, Jahmyr Gibbs is still a high-end dynasty running back. But you're not going to win your fantasy league on the back of Jahmyr Gibbs alone. He's not going to be Christian McCaffrey. That's not going to happen. He's never going to be a workhorse. He had more than, I believe, 17 carries just once. Most of the games, he was in the 11, 12 carry range. Like this one, where he had 12. Bijan Robinson, we know, has the ability to be a workhorse. Breece Hall, we saw it down the stretch in the NFL, even on a horrific offense. I have Jahmyr Gibbs at running back 3 behind those two. In the previous 2 playoff games, Jahmyr Gibbs didn't even play a 40% snap share. So Montgomery was highly effective this year. He's not going away. I don't think I'm going to have any Jahmyr Gibbs this offseason. If you got him at the original price, I like it a lot better. But now, if you have to pay a first-round startup pick in 1 QB or a mid-second round startup pick in Superflex, I just can't imagine that I'm going to spend that on a running back who, doesn't have that league winning upside of like a Christian McCaffrey type, Breece Hall when he was at his best. He doesn't have that upside. So I'm probably not going to have any Jahmyr Gibbs this offseason. I'd rather have wide receivers in his range. I'd much rather draft someone like Puka Nacua or Garrett Wilson with that pick over Jahmyr Gibbs in Dynasty. Now, speaking of the Lions receiving offense. I think some people are going to take the wrong takeaway from this game. It's all Sam LaPorta and Amon-Ra St. Brown, not Jameson Williams. Now, we know Jameson Williams had 2 touchdowns, but it came on 3 targets and 1 rushing attempt. 2 of those which were caught. He still is playing behind Josh Reynolds, who had 92% of snaps compared to 72% for Williams. Reynolds had the same number of targets and attempts. So it just isn't going to happen. Sam LaPorta had 13 targets. He caught 9 of them for 97 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 11 targets. Caught 7 of them for 87 yards. Those are the top 2 weapons, period. There is no universe in which Jameson Williams is ever going to overtake Sam LaPorta or Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's not going to happen. So I get that Williams is flashy, but he's kind of in a tough spot here. You also have Jahmyr Gibbs challenging for targets. The Lions like to run the ball. Jared Goff is a solid quarterback, but he cannot support a strong running game, LaPorta, St. Brown, and another wide receiver. Now, some of you are going to say, oh, well, as a Ram, he supported 3 fantasy-relevant wide receivers. Well, not really. The Rams ran a lot more plays. They didn't run the ball as much. And they didn't have one single wide receiver like Amon-Ra St. Brown. And this is not a Sean McVay offense. This is a Dan Campbell offense. It's not the same. And it's not going to be. So, yeah, let's look at Jameson Williams averaged 2 catches and just under 30 yards a game in 2023. He scored 3 touchdowns in the whole regular season. So it's not like he has 10 touchdowns and we're looking at a lot of touchdowns. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not there for fantasy. He's a huge sell. I still see people ranking him around wide receiver 30, wide receiver 35 in Dynasty. It's way too high. It's just not going to happen. It's not there. So definitely a sell for me. Not a player I've ever been interested in. Last one. Brock Purdy. We need to be fair. Let's be honest. Purdy hasn't been spectacular in the last 2 playoff games. This one, he was better than the last one. 20 of 31 for 267 yards, touchdown, interception, 5 carries, 48 yards rushing. Now, it's not as good as his regular season numbers, which were insane. 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 69.4% completion, and 9.6 yards per attempt. We just need to be honest. We need to be honest about what Brock Purdy is. He's not elite as a passer. We're not going to see Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. These are what I would call elite passers. These are elite. He's never going to be that. Never, ever, ever. He doesn't have it in him. Nor is he what we want for fantasy football. Someone who does something with their arm plus has some level of elite rushing in some way. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. These are elite fantasy options. Not going to be that ever because he doesn't run enough. His 48 yards rushing was one of his best rushing games this game. But after those seven elite players, we got to recognize that Brock Purdy is in the same tier as guys like Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa. Those are probably the most similar. in terms of what they actually do. The only difference is that Purdy's in a much better situation right now than they are. Jordan Love might have some similarities. Dak Prescott, potentially. And then you have kind of at the low end, Jared Goff, who I think, we saw was in a very similar situation in McVay times and wasn't as good as Purdy is now. And at the higher end, you have the rushers who are a little less proven, Kyler Murray and Anthony Richardson. But that's the group he's in. You can put him anywhere in there you want, but anywhere from 8 to 15, that is what Brock Purdy is in Dynasty. And I think also what he is in real life as a quarterback. So he's a solid franchise quarterback. He'll be a starter for a long time. He has the ability to be really good for fantasy football. He's not going to be top 5 because he doesn't run, but solid quarterback 1 for fantasy when things are going right. And even when he's missing a weapon or two, he's still going to be okay. Kind of think if you had Kirk Cousins' career from the beginning to the end of it, what that's worth in Dynasty. 8 years of that. What is that worth in Dynasty Superflex? I mean, I would spend a second-round starter pick on that. Absolutely. And that's where he's going. Fine with the price. If it starts to get into the first round of Superflex startups, I'm not doing that because situations change and the innate talent is not Superflex first round worthy. So just something to keep in mind. Now, if you like the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to support the channel directly. Then, if you want to ask questions for shows, the Patreon, it's in the top right corner of the video. Patreon.com/fantasy advice. You can ask questions. I did a Dynasty trade show recently. All trades came from my Patreon Discord. I really enjoyed doing that video. I think it went over well. I'm going to make that a feature of the offseason. So we had these questions from patrons on a lot of my videos, and then those Dynasty trade videos all coming from patrons. So big incentive to sign up for the Patreon at patreon.com/fantasy advice. On this one, we have 2 questions from the Patreon, so we'll just jump into those right now. In a rebuild, is it more important to grab as many second, third, fourth round picks as possible, or should I be looking to buy proven players? Generally, building around picks is the way to go because picks don't get hurt. Picks rise in value up until the moment they're on the clock. Guaranteed. So you want the guaranteed assets, not the ones that might get hurt. The players to get rid of for picks. Now, I'm not saying sell good players for second round picks. That's not what I'm saying. Sell the middling players, the players that do not hold value. If you have like an older running back, a David Montgomery per se, probably want to sell him, an older running back. Wide receiver who's not doing so great, roster clogger types, Romeo Doubs, those kind of players, Jacoby Myers. These are the players we sell for picks, which have a better chance to gain value. Yeah, so that's kind of what I do. Strip it down to the studs and then a bunch of picks to kind of, you want to have stud quarterbacks in Superflex, young wide receivers, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, these younger receivers, build around them. And then you kind of accumulate those later picks to fill in those gaps. Last question. Thoughts on Carolina hiring Dave Canales? Does this change the outlook for Bryce? No doubt that Canales crushed it with Baker Mayfield as Tampa Bay's offensive coordinator. Not sure that he's the most prepared head coach of all time, especially dealing with David Tepper. But if Canales cannot fix Bryce Young, I don't think anyone can. This is a great hire. He's proven to work with quarterbacks. So I like the hire. Doesn't really change my outlook, but it's a good hire. I'm not going to complain that Young got a good hire, but I'm more interested in seeing how they fix his wide receiver room, because if they don't fix that, Bryce Young's not going to be successful running it back with Jonathan Mingo and Adam Thielen next year. If you liked the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's always the best way to support the channel. Like I said, Patreon, patreon.com/fantasy advice, links up there. And of course, you can always see my content on Twitter at TylerFFCreator. Everything is posted there, but most of the interaction occurs on YouTube and the Patreon. So these are the places to interact with me directly. I want to thank everyone for watching. I really enjoyed my time at the AFC Championship. If you saw my pictures, but yeah, just thank everyone in the audience. And yeah, I will see you all later. Peace out.